The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't fought with conventional weapons or traditional battle tactics. Instead, it was a conflict of ideas, memories, and the very nature of reality itself. Siano had become the military leader of the Inheritor forces, his awakened memories providing him with strategic knowledge that spanned thousands of years. He stood on the bridge of a ship that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, watching as Dominion fleets tried desperately to stop the advancing Inheritor vessels. "They still don't understand what we've become," he said to his crew. "They're fighting the war they expected to fight, not the war we're actually bringing to them." The Inheritor ships moved through space like ghosts, phasing in and out of normal reality. When Dominion weapons fired at them, the energy blasts simply passed through empty space where the ships had been moments before. But when the Inheritors fought back, their weapons seemed to rewrite the laws of physics around their targets. Dr. Kyung, now fully awakened to his human heritage, had joined the Inheritor cause. His scientific knowledge combined with his recovered memories made him one of their most valuable assets in understanding how to counter Dominion technology. "The key is that we don't just use advanced science," he explained to a group of newly awakened Inheritors. "We use science that exists across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their sensors can't detect us because we're not entirely in their reality anymore." The awakening continued to spread throughout Dominion space. On world after world, populations that had served the Dominion for thousands of years discovered that they were actually descendants of humanity. Factory workers became master engineers overnight. Farmers began designing spacecraft that could traverse between galaxies. Children started speaking in the mathematical languages that had been used to encode the original awakening signals. But the Dominion wasn't giving up without a fight. Admiral Jinsu, driven to desperation by the collapse of everything he had believed in, made a decision that would either save his empire or destroy the galaxy. "Activate Protocol Zero," he ordered his remaining loyal officers. All of them. Every system under Dominion control. Protocol Zero was the ultimate weapon, something that had been prepared in secret during the original war against humanity. It was designed to sterilize entire star systems, destroying all life within them rather than allowing human influence to spread. The Dominion leaders had hoped never to use it, but now they saw no other choice. The first Protocol Zero device activated near a mining colony where the Inheritor awakening had begun only days earlier. The weapon created a wave of energy that should have destroyed everything in the system, erasing all life and leaving only empty space behind. But instead of destruction, something miraculous happened. As the wave of deadly energy approached the colony, the awakened humans there simply stepped sideways out of normal reality, taking their entire world with them. The Protocol Zero weapon passed through empty space where a planet had been moments before, accomplishing nothing. "Impossible," Admiral Jinsu whispered, watching the readings from his command ship. "Where did they go?" The answer came from Ryujin, whose voice now spoke directly into the minds of every being in the galaxy. "We exist in dimensions you cannot perceive, Admiral. Your weapons cannot destroy what they cannot touch." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as Protocol Zero weapons failed to achieve their purpose. The Inheritors had evolved beyond the reach of conventional destruction. They could phase entire solar systems out of normal space-time, protecting them from any attack the Dominion could mount. Dayun, leading a group of newly awakened Inheritors, demonstrated their true power when a Dominion fleet tried to destroy her homeworld. Instead of fighting the ships directly, she and her followers simply changed the nature of space around the attackers. "You came here to destroy us," she said, her voice reaching the Dominion crews through their communication systems. "But we offer you something better than destruction. We offer you the truth about who you really are." The Dominion ships found themselves surrounded by visions, not illusions, but actual memories drawn from their own genetic heritage. Crew members who had thought themselves to be purely alien species saw their own ancestors among the humans who had supposedly been their enemies. They witnessed the real history of the galaxy, the scientific achievements and cultural wonders that humanity had created before the Dominion destroyed them. Many of the Dominion crews simply surrendered, overwhelmed by the revelation that they were fighting against their own heritage. Others tried to resist, but found that their weapons had no effect on beings who could exist outside the normal laws of physics. Commander Wubin, still trapped near the Nexus, was witnessing the transformation of reality itself. The structure that Ryujin inhabited was growing, expanding into dimensions that his instruments couldn't measure. Space around it was becoming something new, something that operated according to rules that no Dominion scientist had ever discovered. "What are you doing to the galaxy?" he asked Ryujin during one of their conversations. "We are preparing it for the next phase of evolution," Ryujin replied. "The physical universe is just the beginning, Commander. There are layers of reality beyond what your species has ever imagined. Humanity learned to access those layers during our long exile, and now we're ready to share that knowledge with our children." The war reached its climax when Admiral Jinsu made a final, desperate gambit. If he couldn't destroy the Inheritors with conventional weapons, he would use the galaxy's most closely guarded secret, the Omega device, a weapon that could unravel the fundamental forces that held reality together. "If we activate this, everything dies," warned Dr. Yuki, his chief scientist. "Not just the Inheritors, not just our enemies. Everyone and everything in this galaxy will be destroyed. Better that than allowing human contamination to spread beyond our borders," Jinsu replied coldly. "At least the rest of the universe will be safe." But as the Omega device powered up, preparing to tear apart the fabric of space-time itself, the Inheritors revealed the true extent of their transformation. They didn't just exist in multiple dimensions, they had become guardians of those dimensions, protectors of reality itself. Xianho appeared on the bridge of Jinsu's command ship, not as a hologram or a transmission, but as a physical presence that had somehow passed through all their security systems without triggering any alarms. "You would destroy an entire galaxy to preserve your empire?" he asked, his voice filled with sadness rather than anger. "Is this what the Dominion has become?" "You're the real monsters," Jinsu replied, drawing his sidearm and pointing it at Xianho. "You've corrupted everything we built." Xianho looked at the weapon without fear. "We didn't corrupt anything, Admiral. We simply reminded people who they really were. The empire you're trying to save was built on lies and genocide. It was never worth preserving." When Jinsu pulled the trigger, the energy bolt passed harmlessly through Xianho's body. The Inheritor leader wasn't entirely solid anymore. He existed partially in dimensions where physical weapons had no meaning. "We could stop you by force," Xianho continued. "We could disable your weapon and imprison everyone who opposes us. But that wouldn't solve the real problem. The real problem is that you've forgotten what it means to be alive." Around them, the Omega device continued charging, preparing to unleash destruction on a galactic scale. But instead of trying to stop it through violence, the Inheritors chose a different approach. They began to sing. It started with just a few voices, then spread to include every awakened human in the galaxy. The song wasn't heard with ears but felt in the quantum depths of every atom, every particle of matter and energy. It was a song of memory and hope, of civilizations that had lived and died and been reborn, of the endless cycle of growth and change that defined all existence. And as the song spread throughout the galaxy, something remarkable happened. The Omega device, designed to destroy reality, began to resonate with the harmonics of creation itself. Instead of unraveling the universe, it began to heal it, reversing damage that had been done by millennia of warfare and hatred. The final battle for the galaxy would not be won by the strongest weapons or the most advanced technology. It would be won by the oldest power in the universe, the simple desire of conscious beings to grow, to learn, and to become something greater than what they had been before. In the deepest archives of the Galactic Library, hidden data cores began activating for the first time in millennia. The information they contained painted a very different picture of humanity's final years than what the Dominion had always taught. Dr. Hana, now considered a criminal by the Dominion but protected by the awakened monitoring stations, found herself with access to historical records that had been sealed since the end of the human war. What she discovered changed everything she thought she knew about the past. The humans had not been the aggressive, violent species that Dominion propaganda described. Instead, they had been explorers and scientists, spreading throughout the galaxy not to conquer but to learn and help other species develop. When the Dominion coalition formed to destroy them, humanity had faced an impossible choice. They could have fought, Hana said to Minho and Sora as they reviewed the ancient files aboard their captured Dominion research vessel. The humans had the technology to wage a war that would have torn the galaxy apart. But they chose a different path. The record showed that a human leader known only as the Architect had developed a plan that would take thousands of years to complete. Instead of fighting a war they might not win, humanity would transform itself and wait for the right moment to return. "Look at this," Minho said, pointing to a technical schematic on his screen. They were modifying their own genetic code decades before the war even started. They weren't just changing themselves, they were creating new versions of humanity that could survive in any environment. The plan had been incredibly complex. Human scientists had spent centuries seeding their modified genetic material throughout the galaxy, disguising it within the DNA of other species. When those species evolved and developed, they carried human potential within them without knowing it. The signals that were now awakening the inheritors had been designed to activate this dormant heritage when the time was right. Commander Wubin, still trapped near the Nexus with what remained of his fleet, was learning the same terrible truth. Ryujin, the being who claimed to be the Architect, was showing him recordings of the final days before Earth's destruction. "We knew you were coming," Ryujin explained, his image flickering slightly as if he existed partially in another dimension. "Our scientists had predicted the formation of the Dominion Coalition decades before it happened. We could have prepared weapons to defend ourselves. We could have struck first, but we chose wisdom over violence." The recordings showed human families saying goodbye to each other as they uploaded their consciousness into quantum storage systems. Children who would never grow up in physical form were preserved as pure information, waiting to be reborn in new bodies when the time was right. Entire cities were converted into energy patterns and hidden in the quantum foam that existed between dimensions. "You destroyed our bodies, Commander Wubin, but you could not destroy our essence. We became something your dominion could not comprehend, a species that existed as pure thought and will, unbound by the limitations of physical matter." Meanwhile, across the galaxy the awakening was accelerating. Dayun, the former farmer who had become a leader among the inheritors, was overseeing the construction of vessels unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The ships seemed to grow rather than be built, their organic-looking hulls responding to the thoughts and intentions of their crews. "These are not just machines," she explained to her followers. "They are extensions of ourselves, crafted from materials that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When we travel in them, we do not move through space. We reshape space around us." The inheritor fleets began appearing throughout Dominion territory, but they did not come as conquerors. Instead, they arrived as liberators, awakening populations that had been living under Dominion rule for thousands of years, without knowing their true heritage. On the industrial world of Kepler 186, a factory worker named Sionho felt the familiar tingling in his mind as the inheritor broadcasts reached his planet. But his awakening was different from the others. Along with the memories of human science and culture, he also inherited tactical knowledge and strategic thinking that seemed to come from a military background. "I remember the war," he said to his fellow workers as they gathered in secret. Not just the official version, but what really happened. The humans didn't lose because they were weak. They chose to appear weak while they prepared for something much bigger. Sionho's military memories showed him formations and strategies that could work against Dominion forces. More importantly, they showed him how to fight a war that wasn't just about destroying enemies, but about awakening allies who didn't know they were allies yet. "We don't need to conquer the Dominion," he realized. "We need to show them who they really are." Dr. Kyung, working frantically in his laboratory to find a way to stop the genetic awakenings, made a discovery that shook him to his core. His own DNA contained human markers. He was one of them, one of the sleeping descendants of humanity that the signals were designed to awaken. "No," he whispered, staring at the test results. "This can't be right. I'm Calarian. My family has been Calarian for generations, but the genetic evidence was undeniable. His species, like so many others in the Dominion, was actually a modified branch of humanity that had been carefully engineered to survive in different environments. The Calarians weren't a separate species at all. They were human children who had been changed to breathe different air and live under different stars." As the truth sank in, Kyung felt his own awakening beginning. Memories that weren't his own started flowing through his mind. Memories of laboratories and experiments, of parents who had sacrificed everything to ensure their children's survival, of a plan so vast and patient that it had taken thousands of years to unfold. Admiral Jinsu, desperate to maintain control, ordered the activation of the Dominion's most powerful weapons, planet-killing devices that had been held in reserve since the end of the human war were prepared for deployment against worlds where the Inheritor Awakening was most advanced. If we cannot stop this contamination from spreading, we will sterilize entire systems, he declared to his remaining loyal officers. The Dominion will survive, even if we have to rebuild it from nothing. But when the order was given to fire the first planet killer, something unexpected happened. The weapon simply refused to work. Its targeting systems showed error messages in languages that weren't in any Dominion database. The computer systems that controlled the galaxy's most dangerous weapons had been compromised by something that seemed to understand them better than their creators did. "Sir," reported a terrified technician, "the weapon is responding to commands, but not our commands. Someone else is controlling it." On the screen, Ryujin's face appeared again, but this time he wasn't just communicating with Commander Wubin's trapped fleet. He was speaking to every Dominion facility simultaneously, his image appearing on every screen in their space. "The children have awakened," he said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "They remember who they are and what they are capable of. The long game is nearly over, and humanity's patience is about to be rewarded." Around the galaxy, the Inheritor fleets began moving with purpose and coordination that defied military understanding. They didn't attack Dominion positions directly. Instead, they began broadcasting the true history of the galaxy to every inhabited world, showing the populations what their leaders had hidden from them for thousands of years. The Dominion's carefully constructed empire, built on the lie that they had saved the galaxy from human aggression, began to crumble as the truth spread faster than they could contain it. Species that had served the Dominion loyally for millennia began to question everything they had been taught, and in the quantum depths of space, something vast and patient began to stir. The architect's plan had taken thousands of years to unfold, but now the final phase was beginning. Humanity's children were coming home, and they brought with them the power to reshape reality itself. The news of the destroyed Dominion fleet spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Admiral Jinsu tried to keep the information classified, but too many people had seen the battle. Within days, every inhabited world knew that something had awakened in the old human territories. Dr. Kyung, the Dominion's best scientist, worked day and night in his laboratory, trying to understand what had happened. The few surviving recordings from the destroyed ships showed weapons and technology that shouldn't exist. The ancient station had absorbed energy blasts that could destroy planets, then fired back with beams that seemed to erase matter from existence. "This makes no sense," Kyung muttered to himself, reviewing the data for the 100th time. "The humans were primitive when we destroyed them. They couldn't have built something like this." But as more stations began activating across the galaxy, Kyung realized he was wrong about many things. The signals weren't just communications, they were genetic triggers, awakening something that had been sleeping in the DNA of millions of beings throughout Dominion space. On the farming world of Kepler 442, a young woman named Dione was working in the grain fields when the change began. She had lived her entire life as a simple agricultural worker, never thinking about anything more complex than crop rotations and weather patterns. But when the signal reached her world, memories that weren't her own began flooding her mind. She remembered building massive spaceships. She remembered mathematical formulas that could bend space and time. She remembered being human even though she looked nothing like the humans in the history books. "What's happening to me?" she whispered, falling to her knees in the middle of the field. Similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of worlds. Factory workers suddenly understood advanced engineering. Farmers began designing fusion reactors. Children started speaking in languages that had supposedly been dead for thousands of years. The Dominion's carefully maintained order began to crumble as these awakened beings, calling themselves the Inheritors, started to organize. They weren't violent or aggressive like the old stories about humans suggested. Instead, they were methodical, purposeful, working together with an efficiency that terrified Dominion leaders. Commander Wubin, who had served with Hana on the Convergence before the mission to the ancient station, now led a Dominion task force trying to locate the source of the signals. His orders were simple: find where the signals were coming from and destroy it before more people could be affected. "Sir, we've identified the origin point," reported his navigation officer. It's in the galactic core in a region that was declared off-limits after the human war. Wubin studied the star charts. The coordinates led to a place that existed in the official records only as a warning beacon. Ships were told to avoid the area because of dangerous radiation levels. Now he realized that was probably a lie. The Dominion had been hiding something there for thousands of years. Set course for the core, he ordered, and prepare all weapon systems. If we find more human technology, I want to be ready. Meanwhile, on dozens of worlds, the inheritors were beginning to construct things that defied physics as the Dominion understood it. Dune, the former farmer, had become a leader among her people. The memories awakening in her mind included not just human knowledge, but the accumulated wisdom of dozens of species that humanity had encountered during their long exile. We are not just human, she explained to her followers. We are what humanity became when they chose evolution over extinction. Our ancestors spread their genetic material throughout the galaxy, ensuring that their children would inherit not just their biology, but their potential. The ships the inheritors built looked like works of art more than weapons of war. They curved and flowed like living things, their hulls seeming to shift and change depending on how you looked at them. When they moved through space, they didn't just travel from one point to another. They reshaped the space around them, taking shortcuts through dimensions that the Dominion didn't even know existed. Dr. Kyung finally made a breakthrough in his analysis of the genetic changes. The awakening wasn't random. It was following patterns embedded in the DNA of species across the galaxy. Species that the Dominion had thought were natural evolutionary developments were actually the descendants of humanity, modified and scattered by their ancestors before Earth's destruction. They knew, Kyung said in amazement. The humans knew we were going to destroy them, so they made sure their children would survive. They seeded their genetic material throughout the galaxy for centuries, creating backup copies of their species disguised as other forms of life. Admiral Jinsu received Kyung's report with growing horror. If the scientist was right, then nearly half the species in Dominion space carried human DNA. The war against humanity hadn't been a victory, it had been the opening move in a game that spanned thousands of years. How long before all the affected populations complete their transformation? He asked. At the current rate, perhaps 6 months, maybe less. The Admiral stared out the window of his command ship at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, humanity's children were remembering who they were and preparing for the next phase of their evolution. The Dominion's greatest enemy hadn't died. They had simply been waiting. Commander, Wubin's fleet reached the galactic core after weeks of dangerous travel through regions of space that seemed to actively resist their presence. What they found there defied all logic and reason. The Nexus was a structure that existed partially outside normal space and time. Parts of it could be seen with conventional sensors, but other parts seemed to phase in and out of reality. It was massive beyond comprehension, larger than most solar systems, yet somehow it had been hidden from detection for thousands of years. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the structure, reported the communications officer. The main screen flickered to life, showing a human face that seemed familiar somehow. The being spoke in perfect Dominion standard, but there was something about his voice that suggested vast intelligence and patience. Greetings, Commander Wubin. I am Ryujin, though your colleague Dr. Hana would know me as the architect. You have come a long way to find us, and you arrive at precisely the right moment. You're human, Wubin said, unable to hide his shock. I was human once. Now I am something more, as are all my children who are awakening across your galaxy. We have been patient, Commander. We have watched and learned while your Dominion built its empire on the ashes of the civilizations you destroyed, but patience has its limits. Around the Nexus, space itself began to change. Stars shifted position. Entire solar systems seemed to fold in on themselves and reappear elsewhere. The Dominion fleet found itself surrounded by phenomena that their science couldn't explain. The children of humanity are coming home, Commander Wubin, and they bring with them the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 worlds. Your Dominion's time as the rulers of this galaxy is ending. As if to demonstrate the truth of those words, the inheritor fleets began to appear throughout Dominion space. They didn't attack aggressively or seek to conquer territory. Instead, they simply arrived at world after world, broadcasting the true history of the galaxy and awakening more of their sleeping cousins. The galaxy that had been built on the lie of humanity's destruction. was about to learn the truth about what their supposed victory had actually cost them. Admiral Jinsu stood in the command center of the Dominion's largest space station, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. The mysterious signals were spreading faster than anyone had expected. What started as 17 synchronized transmissions had grown to over 200 in just 3 days. "Sir, we're receiving panic reports from 12 different sectors," reported his aide, a young officer from the Calarian species. "Ship captains are requesting permission to flee the areas where these signals are appearing." Admiral Jinsu was getting old, even by Dominion standards. He had lived through the final years of the war against humanity, and he remembered how dangerous they could be. The thought that they might still exist somewhere made his blood run cold. "Issue Order 7 across all affected systems," he commanded. "Any ship that encounters these signals is to be destroyed immediately. We cannot allow this contamination to spread." Meanwhile, aboard the Convergence, Dr. Hana was studying the signals in secret. Captain Tejo had ordered her to stop her research, but she couldn't help herself. The patterns were becoming clearer the more she analyzed them. The signals weren't just random messages. They were coordinates. Each transmission was pointing to specific locations in space, like a map leading somewhere important. "Hana, you need to see this," Sora whispered, floating over to her station. The pilot had been helping her decode the signals during their off-duty hours. "What did you find?" "I plotted all the coordinates the signals are pointing to. They all lead to the same place, a region of dead space about 50 light-years from here. There's supposed to be nothing there but an old nebula." Hana felt excitement building in her chest. "We need to go there. Are you crazy? Captain Tejo will never approve a mission like that, and even if he would, the Dominion has probably classified that entire region as off-limits by now." Hana looked around the research lab. Minho was working at another station, but he was close enough to hear them if they spoke too loudly. She motioned for Sora to follow her to a quiet corner. "What if we didn't ask for permission?" she whispered. Sora's eyes widened. "You mean steal a ship?" "Hana, that's treason. They would execute us. Only if we get caught, and only if we're wrong about what we'll find out there." It took 2 more days of secret planning, but finally they were ready. Minho had agreed to help them after Hana showed him more of her analysis. The 3 of them waited until the night shift when most of the crew was asleep, then made their way to the ship's docking bay. The Convergence carried several small scout ships for research missions. Hana had chosen the fastest one, a sleek vessel that could travel between star systems quickly and quietly. Getting it started without alerting the main ship's computer was the hardest part, but Minho's engineering skills made it possible. They were 3 hours into their journey when Captain Tejo discovered they were missing. By then they were already approaching the coordinates the signals had been pointing toward. "There," Sora said, pointing at her navigation screen. "That nebula is where all the signals are leading." From the outside, it looked like any other cloud of space dust and gas. But as they got closer, their sensors started picking up something unusual. There was a massive structure hidden inside the nebula, something too regular and geometric to be natural. "It's a space station," Minho said in amazement. "But it's huge. Bigger than anything the Dominion has ever built." The station was dark and appeared to be very old. Its surface was covered with strange symbols and designs that none of them recognized. But their equipment showed it was still functional, still drawing power from some unknown source. "I'm reading atmosphere inside," Sora reported. "It's safe for us to breathe." They docked their small ship with the station and put on protective suits just to be safe. The airlock opened with a soft hiss and they stepped inside. The corridors were enormous, built for beings much larger than any species in the current galaxy. Emergency lighting flickered on as they walked, responding to their presence. Everything was covered with the same strange symbols they had seen on the outside. "Look at this," Hana said, stopping in front of a wall covered with writing. "I think these are human symbols, but they're much more complex than anything in the historical records." They made their way deeper into the station, following the main corridor toward what seemed to be a control center. The room they finally reached was filled with massive computers and display screens. Most of them were dark, but a few were still showing information. Minho found a way to connect his portable computer to the station's systems. "I'm getting something," he said excitedly. "These are data logs, thousands of them, dating back thousands of years." The first log they accessed made them all freeze in shock. It was a video recording of a human, but not like any human they had seen in the historical files. This person looked different somehow, more advanced. When he spoke, the computer automatically translated his words. My name is J1, but the others call me the cartographer. If you are seeing this, then the signals have done their job. The children are finally ready to remember who they are. Hana grabbed Minho's arm. Play the next one. The recordings told an incredible story. The humans hadn't been completely destroyed in the war. Some of them had escaped, but not in the way anyone expected. They had changed themselves, evolved into something beyond physical existence. They had been watching the galaxy ever since, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. The Dominion thinks they won the war, said another recording. This one from a human woman named Yunha. But we were never fighting the war they thought we were fighting. We were playing a much longer game. As they watched more recordings, they began to understand the true scope of what they had discovered. The station wasn't just a hiding place. It was a monitoring post, one of many scattered throughout the galaxy. The humans had been watching, learning, planning for thousands of years. The final recording was the most recent, dated only a few months ago. The human in this video looked directly at the camera as if he could see, through time, to the people who would eventually watch it. The children have been scattered across the galaxy for so long that they've forgotten their heritage, but their genetic memory is still there, waiting to be awakened. The signals will trigger that memory. Soon the galaxy will remember what it lost when humanity was supposedly destroyed. Suddenly, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Their small ship's communication system crackled to life with Captain Taiho's angry voice. Dr. Hana, you and your team will return to the Convergence immediately. Dominion military ships are approaching your location. You have put all of us in terrible danger. Through the station's windows, they could see the lights of approaching warships. The Dominion fleet had found them, and they looked ready for battle. But as the first shots were fired at the ancient station, something impossible happened. The weapons simply disappeared, absorbed by some kind of energy field around the structure. Then the station fired back with weapons that no one in the current galaxy had ever seen before. The Dominion ships were torn apart like paper. Hana watched in awe and terror as the station's defenses easily destroyed an entire fleet. Whatever the humans had become during their long exile, they were far more powerful than anyone had imagined. The station's computer spoke in a calm voice. Defense protocols activated. Intruders eliminated. Preparing to contact other monitoring stations across the galaxy. The research ship Convergence moved slowly through the dark space near what used to be called the Sol system. Dr. Hana pressed her face against the viewing window, watching the scattered rocks and metal pieces drift past. 3,000 years had passed since the humans were destroyed, but she still felt strange looking at the remains of their homeworld. Another boring day studying dead rocks, said Minho, the ship's engineer. He floated over to join her at the window. Why do we keep coming to places like this? Hana turned to look at him. Because the Dominion wants us to learn from the mistakes of dead races. They want to make sure no other species becomes as dangerous as the humans were. The Dominion ruled the galaxy now. 12 different alien species worked together to keep peace and order. They had fought a great war against humanity long ago, and they had won. Now the galaxy was safe and peaceful. At least that's what everyone was taught. Captain Taiho's voice came over the ship's communication system. All research teams report to your stations. We're beginning the survey of Grid Section 7. Hana pushed off from the window and floated toward her workstation. She was a xenoarchaeologist, someone who studied the remains of alien civilizations. It wasn't the most exciting job, but she was good at it. She had spent years learning about dead cultures and forgotten languages. Her equipment started picking up signals as soon as she turned it on. Most of them were normal. Radiation from old battles, signals from broken machines, the usual things you found in dead star systems. But then she noticed something different. That's odd, she said to herself. The signal was very old, maybe as old as the destruction of this system. But it wasn't random like the others. It had patterns like someone was trying to send a message. Hana adjusted her equipment to get a better reading. The patterns were mathematical. Numbers arranged in sequences that meant something. She had seen similar patterns before in her studies of ancient languages. This looked like some kind of code. Sora, can you come look at this? She called to the ship's pilot. Sora pushed herself over to Hana's station. What did you find? Look at these patterns. Do they seem familiar to you? Sora studied the screen for a moment. They look like the old human mathematical systems we learned about in school. But that can't be right. All the human signals died out thousands of years ago. Hana felt her heart beating faster. She had studied human languages as part of her training. The Dominion kept records of human culture so they could recognize dangerous ideas if they ever appeared again. She pulled up some old files and started comparing them to the signal. The match was almost perfect. "This is definitely human," she whispered. "But how is that possible?" She tried to decode more of the signal, feeding the patterns into her computer. The machine worked for several minutes, then displayed a message on her screen. It was just numbers at first, but then her computer translated them into Galactic Standard Language. The message was simple. "Remember us." Hana stared at the screen in shock. Then something even more amazing happened. Her equipment started detecting similar signals from other parts of space. First one, then three, then dozens. All of them were broadcasting the same basic message in the same mathematical code. "Minho, Sora, you need to see this," she said in a shaky voice. They gathered around her station as more signals appeared on the screen. Each one was coming from a different star system, but they were all synchronized. They all pulsed at exactly the same time, like they were connected somehow. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Minho said. "The humans are all dead." Everyone knows that, but Hana wasn't so sure. She had read the official reports about the war against humanity. The humans had been completely destroyed, their worlds burned, their ships scattered. But what if some of them had escaped? What if they had been hiding all this time? Captain Tejo's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Dr. Hana, report to the bridge immediately. Bring all your data with you." Hana gathered her equipment and made her way to the bridge. Captain Tejo was standing in front of the main screen looking worried. He was a member of the Vraxian species, with gray skin and large black eyes. Usually he was calm and confident, but now he seemed nervous. "Show me what you found," he ordered. Hana connected her equipment to the ship's main computer and displayed the signals on the big screen. Captain Tejo watched in silence as the synchronized pulses appeared from 17 different star systems. "This must be some kind of natural phenomenon," he said finally. "Maybe old machines turning on by accident." "Sir, I've analyzed the patterns. They're definitely artificial, and they match human mathematical systems. I think someone is trying to communicate with us." Captain Tejo's large eyes got even bigger. "That's impossible. The humans were wiped out completely. The Dominion made sure of that. But what if they weren't? What if some of them survived?" The captain turned away from the screen. "Dr. Hana, you will not discuss this with anyone else on the ship. I'm sending a report to Dominion Command. They will decide what to do about these signals. Sir, shouldn't we investigate further? If there are humans still alive, then they are enemies of the Dominion," Captain Tejo said firmly. "We don't investigate enemies. We report them and let the military handle it." Hana wanted to argue, but she knew it wouldn't help. The captain was following orders just like everyone else in the Dominion. The idea that humans might still exist somewhere in the galaxy was too dangerous to consider. But as she returned to her station, Hana couldn't stop thinking about the signals. They weren't random. They weren't accidents. Someone was out there sending a message across the galaxy, someone who remembered the old human languages and the old human ways. The signals kept coming, pulsing in perfect rhythm across 17 star systems. And with each pulse, Hana became more convinced that humanity wasn't as dead as everyone believed. She looked out the window at the debris field that used to be Earth's solar system. Somewhere in the darkness, something was watching and waiting, something that remembered what the galaxy had lost when humanity was destroyed. The signals continued their ancient rhythm, echoing through space like a heartbeat that refused to stop.